Daniel's seemingly perfect life shatters when he discovers his wife, Jessica, has been having an affair with her manipulative coworker as he fights to protect his daughter, Lily, from Jessica's deceit and reckless behavior. Shocking revelations about financial fraud, emotional manipulation, and custody battles come to light. With escalating confrontations and desperate attempts by Jessica to regain control, Daniel faces betrayal at every turn. This intense story of infidelity, deception, and betrayal will leave viewers outraged and questioning just how far someone will go to protect their secrets, and whether redemption is ever truly possible. It was supposed to be just another quiet Friday evening for Daniel Hayes. The smell of roasted chicken lingered in the air as he set the table, lining up plates and silverware with precision. His 15-year-old daughter, Lily, sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, half watching a rerun of some reality show about rich housewives arguing over designer handbags. "Can you pause that for a second?" Daniel asked, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Dinner's ready." Lily groaned but obeyed, setting her phone down as she wandered over to the table. "Mom's late again," she muttered, poking at the salad. Daniel forced a smile. "She's probably just caught up at work. You know how these marketing events go." In truth, he knew exactly where his wife, Jessica, was, or at least he thought he did. Jessica had been attending more client dinners lately, often coming home late with excuses about networking opportunities and deadlines. It had been bothering him for weeks, but tonight he was determined to push the doubt aside. The hum of the garage door opening broke the awkward silence. Jessica walked in moments later, still dressed in her sharp navy blue blazer and pencil skirt, heels clicking against the floor. Her long blonde hair was swept into a loose bun, and she carried the scent of expensive perfume. A little too strong, Daniel noted. "Sorry I'm late," she said, planting a quick kiss on Daniel's cheek before ruffling Lily's hair. "That campaign launch is eating up all my time." Daniel studied her face. She looked tired, or was it guilt he couldn't tell? "It's fine, we just sat down," he replied, pulling out a chair for her. Dinner carried on with the usual small talk, Lily's upcoming volleyball game, Jessica's long work hours, and Daniel's new woodworking project. But underneath the surface, tension simmered. Daniel noticed how Jessica kept glancing at her phone, her fingers twitching, as if waiting for a notification. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Daniel stepped into the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. Jessica was in the living room, curled up with her tablet. "You've been working a lot lately," he said casually, leaning against the counter. Jessica barely looked up. "I have to, Dan. We're trying to land a huge client." "Right," he hesitated. "And the late nights, the canceled plans?" She finally looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "What are you trying to say?" "Nothing, just, I miss you," he admitted. Jessica softened, but there was a flicker of something in her expression. Relief. Annoyance. He couldn't tell. "Me too," she said, reaching for his hand, but the words felt hollow. By Sunday, Daniel's unease hadn't faded. That morning, while Jessica was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. He wasn't proud of what he did next, but curiosity, or maybe desperation, got the better of him. The message flashed on the screen. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Same time next week?" Daniel's stomach dropped. The sender's name, Mark B. His hands trembled as he set the phone down. Jessica's coworker, the guy she'd mentioned in passing, always in the context of team meetings and group brainstorming sessions. For the rest of the day, Daniel couldn't focus. He wanted to confront her, but his mind raced with doubts. What if he'd misunderstood? What if it was all innocent? That night, Jessica left again for work. Daniel waited until her car pulled out of the driveway before walking into their bedroom. He opened her closet and spotted a black leather duffel bag shoved in the corner, the one she always took to the gym. Except Jessica hadn't been to the gym in weeks. Inside, he found a change of clothes, a red dress he didn't recognize, matching heels, and a small bottle of perfume. But the worst part, a hotel key card tucked into the side pocket. His heart pounded as he held the card. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was premeditated. He put everything back exactly as he'd found it. forcing himself to breathe. Then he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. By the time Jessica returned hours later, Daniel had made up his mind he wouldn't say anything, yet he needed more proof. The following week, he started keeping track of her movements. He jotted down times she left, times she returned, and any excuses she gave. He even checked the mileage on her car. It all added up. But the tipping point came when Lily walked into his home office, clutching her mom's old iPad. "Dad," she said, looking pale, "I need to show you something." Daniel took the tablet, his eyes widening as he scrolled through the messages Jessica hadn't logged out of her accounts. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. Dozens of messages to mark explicit emotional planned. "I didn't mean to snoop," Lily said quietly, "but I had this feeling." Daniel swallowed hard, pulling her into a hug. "It's not your fault, sweetheart." He knew then that he couldn't let this go. His marriage wasn't just unraveling, it had already fallen apart. Now it was about survival. "Pack a bag," he told Lily. "We're going to Grandma's for a few days." And just like that, the foundation of Daniel's life, his trust, his family, his marriage, shattered into pieces. Daniel sat in the dimly lit living room of his mother's house, his fingers gripping the edges of the hotel keycard like it might suddenly burst into flames. Lily was asleep upstairs, curled under one of Grandma's thick quilts, but Daniel couldn't rest. His mind kept replaying the messages, the intimate words Jessica had exchanged with Mark, the hotel key, the perfume, the red dress. He stared at his phone. No texts, no calls. Jessica hadn't even asked where they were. The silence confirmed what he feared most. She didn't care, or maybe she was too busy with him to notice they were gone. The next morning, Daniel woke up to the sound of coffee brewing and his mother bustling around the kitchen. She glanced up when he walked in, her eyes heavy with the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions. "Rough night?" she asked, pushing a mug toward him. "You could say that." He took a sip, but the bitterness barely registered. "I need to talk to a lawyer." His mom didn't flinch. "Angela?" Angela was his cousin, a sharp, no-nonsense divorce attorney with a reputation for cutting through lies like a scalpel. "Yeah." His mother nodded. "Good, and Daniel, don't let this destroy you. You're stronger than you think." He wished he felt that way. By noon, he was sitting in Angela's office, laying out every detail. Jessica's late nights, the messages, the hotel keycard. Angela listened, her pen flying across the legal pad. "She's going to fight dirty," Angela warned, sliding her glasses higher on her nose. "Women like Jessica don't go down without a fight, especially not when their image is on the line." Daniel rubbed his temples. "I don't care about appearances, I just want out, and I want Lily safe." Angela paused. "Then we need leverage. If this goes to court, proof of the affair might not be enough. We need to show manipulation, financial, emotional, anything that suggests she put her needs before the family's." Daniel's stomach twisted. It felt like spying, but then he remembered Lily's face when she handed him that tablet Jessica had lied to their daughter too. "I'll get you what you need," he promised. That night, Daniel went back to their house under the pretense of picking up a few things. Jessica wasn't home. He figured she was working late again. His hands shook as he unlocked her desk drawer. Bank statements, receipts, and he froze. A list of scheduled business trips. Except the dates didn't match her calendar. They matched the messages to Mark. But it wasn't just the trips that caught his eye. It was the credit card charges, spa treatments, jewelry, weekend getaways, thousands of dollars spent without explanation. And then there was something worse. A line item for a payment to a private investigator. Daniel's chest tightened. Had she been spying on him? Tracking him? Or worse, building a case against him? He grabbed the papers, shoved them into his bag, and left before she came back. Angela's eyes widened as she flipped through the documents the next morning. "This changes everything," she said. "If she's been hiding money or using marital assets for the affair, the court won't look kindly on that." "And the private investigator?" Angela frowned. "We need to find out what she's looking for, and fast." While Angela dug into the finances, Daniel focused on protecting Lily. He sat her down after school and explained, as gently as he could, that things were going to change. Is it because of the messages? She asked. He winced. Partly, but mostly, it's because I want us to be happy again and safe. Lily nodded. I trust you, Dad. Her words broke him a little, but they also gave him strength. Days passed, and the tension built. Jessica finally noticed they were gone and started leaving voicemails. Apologies, accusations, excuses. Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he waited. Angela had her assistant track down the private investigator Jessica had hired. The report came back within days, and what Daniel read made his blood run cold. Jessica hadn't been spying on him. She'd been building a case to make him look unstable, unfit to keep custody of Lily. False claims about anger issues, financial irresponsibility, even hints that he'd been neglectful. Angela tossed the report on her desk. She's planning to take Lily. No, Daniel said, his voice hard. She won't. From that moment on, Daniel switched gears. He wasn't just collecting evidence. He was preparing for war. He reached out to Lily's teachers and coaches, gathering letters of recommendation that highlighted his involvement in her life. He compiled receipts showing that he paid for her medical bills, school supplies, and extracurricular activities. But he also went further. He started digging into Mark, and what he found flipped the script completely. Mark wasn't just some coworker. He was Jessica's boss, and he had a reputation. Multiple lawsuits for harassment had been quietly settled, but Angela pulled the public records. That's your smoking gun, Angela said. If she's been parading around with a guy like this, the court will question her judgment. The final blow came when Daniel found an email, buried deep in Jessica's inbox, where Mark had referred to Lily as baggage. Daniel saw red. 2 days later, Jessica showed up at his mother's house. She pounded on the door until Daniel finally answered. We need to talk, she hissed. No, we don't, he said, stepping outside and closing the door behind him. Jessica's eyes darted around, probably looking for Lily. You can't keep her from me. Actually, I can. Daniel handed her a stack of papers. Emergency custody order, effective immediately. Her face paled as she scanned the documents. You think you can just take my daughter? Our daughter, he corrected. And I didn't take her. You gave her up the moment you put her last. Jessica's lips trembled. I'll fight this. Daniel didn't flinch. Then fight, but I have evidence. Jessica emails, receipts, text messages, and your boyfriend. He's not exactly Father of the Year material. Tears welled in her eyes, but Daniel didn't let himself feel sorry for her, not after what she'd done. You made your choices, he said. Now you'll have to live with them. As she stormed off, Daniel felt the weight lift from his shoulders, but he also knew this wasn't over. Not yet. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you were in Daniel's shoes? Daniel stood outside the courthouse, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets as the chill of the morning air crept through the seams. Today was the hearing, an emergency custody battle that would determine whether Lily stayed with him or went back to Jessica. The weight of it pressed against his chest like a cinder block. Angela joined him on the steps, clutching a folder thick with documents. You ready for this? He wasn't, but he nodded anyway. Let's get it over with. Inside, Jessica sat at the opposite end of the table, flanked by her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit with the kind of slick confidence that screamed, "Hired shark." She didn't look at Daniel instead. She whispered furiously into her lawyer's ear, as if trying to rewrite reality before it was too late. The hearing started with the usual legal formalities, but things escalated fast. Jessica's lawyer came out swinging, painting Daniel as unstable and overprotective. He uprooted their daughter without warning, the lawyer argued, pacing in front of the judge. He cut off communication with my client, ignoring her parental rights. This behavior raises serious concerns about his ability to co-parent effectively. Daniel clenched his fists under the table, but Angela leaned in. Let him talk, she whispered. We'll tear it down piece by piece. When it was their turn, Angela didn't hesitate. She dropped the hotel receipts, text messages, and screenshots of Jessica's chats with Mark like grenades. Mrs. Hayes not only carried out a months-long affair, but used marital assets to fund it, Angela said, her voice steady and sharp. She prioritized this relationship over her family, even referring to her own daughter as baggage in messages exchanged with her partner. Jessica paled. Her lawyer objected, calling it irrelevant, but the judge allowed it. And then Angela delivered the knockout punch. She handed the judge a transcript of Mark's lawsuits, allegations of harassment and inappropriate conduct with female employees. Mrs. Hayes exposed her daughter to an individual with a documented history of predatory behavior, Angela said. The court must consider whether this represents a pattern of poor judgment and a lack of regard for the child's safety. The air shifted. Even Jessica's lawyer seemed rattled as the judge called for a recess. Outside the courtroom, Jessica cornered Daniel near the vending machines. "How could you do this to me?" "How could I?" Daniel's voice was cold. "You lied. You cheated. You put Lily at risk. I'm just making sure she's safe." Jessica's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she grabbed his arm. "We can fix this, Dan. We can—" He pulled away. "No, Jessica, we can't." By the end of the day, the judge ruled in Daniel's favor, granting him temporary custody until the formal custody hearing. Jessica was allowed supervised visitation. But that was it. She left the courtroom in tears, but Daniel didn't feel victorious, just exhausted. That night, he and Lily sat in the living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. "Is it over?" she asked. "Not yet," he admitted. "But we're safe for now." Lily nodded and leaned against him. "Thanks, Dad." But just when Daniel thought the worst was behind them, the story took another sharp turn. 2 days later, he got a call from Angela. "You need to come to my office now." When he arrived, Angela's face was pale. She pushed a file across the desk. "Jessica isn't done." Daniel flipped it open. Inside were financial statements showing Jessica had withdrawn nearly $20,000 from their joint savings account. Money Daniel hadn't even noticed was gone. "She's liquidating everything," Angela said. "And I don't think it's just for legal fees." Daniel's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "I think she's planning to run." That night, Daniel double-checked that all the locks on the house were secure. He set up security cameras and gave Lily strict instructions not to open the door for anyone. Then he started digging deeper. He went through Jessica's emails again and found what he was looking for: a series of messages to a real estate agent in another state. She was planning to leave, and she was planning to take Lily with her. The next morning, Daniel confronted Jessica outside the house she'd rented after the court ruling. She was loading bags into her car when he pulled up. "Going somewhere?" he asked, stepping out of the car. Jessica froze. "What are you doing here?" "I should be asking you that." She straightened, trying to keep her cool. "I have every right to move. I can't stay here with everyone gossiping about me." "Not with Lily, you don't," Daniel said. "You think I wouldn't find out?" Her eyes darted to the bags. "I wasn't going to take her." "Don't lie to me, Jess." For the first time, her mask slipped completely. "You took everything from me," she screamed. "You turned her against me. You ruined my life." Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice. "No, Jess. You did that all on your own." The police arrived minutes later. Angela had already tipped them off, and Jessica was escorted away in handcuffs for violating the custody order. It wasn't the ending Daniel had hoped for, but it was the one she'd forced on herself. The weeks that followed were quieter. Daniel focused on rebuilding. He took Lily to therapy, helped her get back into volleyball, and started teaching her how to cook, something Jessica had always been too busy to do. And for the first time in months, their house felt like home again. But just when Daniel thought they were finally in the clear, Angela called with one last surprise. "We found something else," she said. "What now?" Daniel braced himself. "Jessica's been hiding money," Angela replied. "A lot of it." Apparently, Jessica and Mark had set up a separate account to fund their plans, and Angela's investigators had uncovered the paper trail. "It's enough to bring fraud charges," Angela said. Daniel exhaled. "File them." Jessica's fall was complete. The affair, the lies, the manipulation. It had all come crashing down. But for Daniel, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about moving forward. And as he sat on the front porch with Lily, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he finally felt at peace. If you're still here, thanks for sticking with the story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this recap. What do you think? Did Daniel handle things the right way? Let us know in the comments. Daniel's heart pounded as he stared at the documents spread out on Angela's desk. Fraud charges, financial manipulation. It was worse than he had imagined. Jessica hadn't just been reckless. She'd been calculating every dollar spent, every move made, all carefully orchestrated to secure her future, while leaving Daniel in the dust. Angela tapped the papers with the end of her pen. This isn't just about taking Lily. She was trying to disappear. New accounts, out-of-state listings, even plane tickets, if we hadn't caught this in time. Daniel didn't let her finish. But we did. Angela looked at him, her expression softening. Yeah, we did. Still, the pit in Daniel's stomach didn't ease. Jessica wasn't the type to give up without a fight, and he knew this wasn't over. Later that night, Daniel sat in the living room, staring at the flickering light from the fireplace. Lily was upstairs, finally asleep after another long day of processing everything that had happened. She was putting on a brave face, but he could see the cracks, the uncertainty. His phone buzzed, a text from Angela. We got the court date. 3 weeks, stay sharp. 3 weeks. That was all the time he had to make sure Jessica didn't find another loophole, and knowing her, she was already looking. The next morning, Daniel drove by Jessica's rented house. He wasn't sure what he expected, maybe a sign that she was giving up, but instead, he saw Mark's car parked in the driveway. His jaw clenched. It wasn't just the betrayal that made his blood boil. It was the arrogance. After everything, she was still dragging that man into their lives. Daniel pulled over a few houses down and waited. 10 minutes later, Mark stepped outside, talking loudly on his phone. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel as he watched him pace. Then Mark did something that changed everything. He tossed a folder into the trash bin at the curb. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He waited until Mark drove off, then walked up to the bin, his eyes scanning the street to make sure no one was watching. He reached in, grabbed the folder, and got back into his car. What he found inside made his stomach drop. It wasn't just receipts and notes. It was a detailed plan Jessica and Mark had been mapping out how to frame Daniel for financial misconduct, painting him as unstable and unfit to handle custody. There were fake invoices, fabricated text messages, even staged emails meant to make it look like Daniel had been funneling money out of their accounts. Daniel's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. He couldn't believe it. They were willing to destroy his entire reputation to win. He called Angela immediately. You need to get over here, he said. An hour later, Angela was flipping through the folder, her expression growing darker with every page. This is criminal, she said. Not just fraud, conspiracy. They planned this for months. What do we do? Daniel asked. Angela closed the folder. We use it, but carefully. We can't let them know we have this until the right moment. The next few days were tense. Daniel barely slept, constantly looking over his shoulder, half expecting Jessica to make another move. But she didn't. Instead, she showed up at Lily's school. Lily called him in a panic. Mom's here. She's talking to the principal. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. Stay put, I'm coming. By the time he arrived, Jessica was sitting in the office, her arms crossed, playing the role of the concerned mother. What are you doing here? Daniel demanded. Jessica turned, her expression calm. I'm here to check on my daughter. You're not supposed to be here. I have visitation rights, she snapped. Supervised visitation, Daniel shot back. Not drop-ins. The principal stepped between them. Let's keep this civil. But there was nothing civil about the way Jessica glared at him. You're poisoning her against me, she hissed. No, Daniel said. You did that all by yourself. By the end of the meeting, the principal sided with Daniel, and Jessica was escorted out. But the damage was done. Lily was shaken. That night, Daniel sat her down. Listen, he said gently. I know this is hard, but you don't have to be afraid I won't let her take you. Lily nodded, but he could see the doubt in her eyes, and that broke him. The next day, Daniel got another call, this time from Angela. They're pushing for a settlement, she said. A settlement? They want joint custody. No supervised visits. Jessica's lawyer is scrambling. Daniel felt the heat rise in his chest. No way, not after everything she's done. Then we fight. And fight they did. The courtroom showdown was brutal. Jessica's lawyer threw everything he had, trying to discredit Daniel and paint Jessica as a victim. But Angela came prepared. She presented the texts, the receipts, the financial statements, and, when the timing was right, the folder Daniel had found in the trash. Jessica's face turned white as the judge read through the evidence. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Mrs. Hayes?" Jessica stammered, trying to explain. But the damage was done. In the end, the judge ruled in Daniel's favor, full custody. No visitation until Jessica completed therapy and proved she was stable. It was over. Or so he thought. Because as Daniel and Lily walked out of the courthouse, Jessica was waiting. "This isn't over," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll fix this. You'll see." But Daniel didn't respond. He just took Lily's hand and kept walking. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories. What do you think? Was the judge's decision fair? Let us know in the comments. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the court papers in his hands. It should have been over. The judge had ruled in his favor, full custody of Lily and no unsupervised visitation for Jessica. But the tension in his chest wouldn't go away, not after the way Jessica had looked at him outside the courthouse. Her words echoed in his mind. This isn't over. And deep down, Daniel knew she meant it. 2 days later, his fears were confirmed. Angela called, her voice sharp. "Jessica just filed an appeal." Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. "You're kidding." "I wish I were," Angela replied. "But there's more. She's also requesting an emergency hearing for visitation rights. She's claiming the previous ruling was unfair, and that new evidence will clear her name." "New evidence?" Daniel's stomach dropped. "What evidence?" "That's what we need to find out." Daniel barely slept that night. He kept pacing the house, checking the locks, and watching the security cameras he'd installed weeks ago. Lily noticed his restlessness, but didn't say anything. She just stayed close, like she needed to feel safe. The next morning, Angela called again. "She's trying to claim parental alienation," Angela said. "She's saying you've turned Lily against her." Daniel's jaw clenched. "That's insane. She did that herself." "It doesn't matter," Angela said. "She's hired a new lawyer, someone aggressive. We need to be ready for anything." And anything came faster than Daniel expected. That evening, a process server showed up at his door with a subpoena. Jessica was pushing for an emergency psychiatric evaluation on him. Daniel stared at the papers, his heart racing. "She's trying to flip this," he said when he called Angela. "Make me look like the unstable one." Angela didn't hesitate. "We'll fight it. But this is her last-ditch effort. She's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." But this wasn't just about him anymore. Jessica was playing dirty, and Daniel couldn't afford to lose. The next day, Daniel met with the court-appointed evaluator. He kept his answers calm and measured, but the whole process felt like an ambush. Jessica's lawyer had provided evidence of Daniel's so-called erratic behavior, out-of-context text messages, exaggerated claims about his temper, and even the argument they'd had outside Lily's school. By the time the session ended, Daniel felt like he'd been stripped bare. When he got home, Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, her textbooks spread out in front of her. She looked up as he walked in. "Is it bad?" she asked softly. Daniel forced a smile. "No, we're okay." But even Lily could tell he was lying. The next morning, Angela called with updates. "Jessica's lawyer is pushing hard for this," she said, "but we've got something they don't." "What's that?" Angela's voice dropped. "Proof that Jessica's been lying to the court." Apparently, Angela's investigator had dug up surveillance footage of Jessica meeting with Mark just days before the first custody hearing, directly violating the court's orders to stay away from him while her fitness as a parent was under review. But that wasn't all. Mark had been caught on camera entering Jessica's rented house late at night and leaving early the next morning multiple times. Angela's voice was sharp. "She's been lying about their relationship the whole time. We're going to bury her with this." But Daniel wasn't celebrating yet. Not until it was over. When the emergency hearing finally came, The courtroom was tense. Jessica's lawyer tried to spin the psychiatric evaluation as proof that Daniel was overprotective and emotionally unstable. But Angela hit back hard, presenting the surveillance footage and financial records that painted a completely different picture. Mrs. Hayes has repeatedly defied court orders, Angela argued. She has exposed her daughter to unsafe situations, lied under oath, and attempted to manipulate evidence against her ex-husband. Jessica's lawyer objected, but the damage was already done. The judge leaned back in his chair, flipping through the evidence. "I'm deeply concerned by what I've seen here," he said. "Mrs. Hayes, you've not only violated the court's orders, but you've actively worked to deceive this court and destabilize your daughter's life." Jessica looked panicked. "Your Honor, I was just trying to—" "Enough." The judge's voice cut her off. "Effective immediately, Mrs. Hayes will have no visitation rights until further review. Any attempts to contact the child outside of legal proceedings will be grounds for contempt." Jessica gasped, and Daniel finally let himself exhale. But as he left the courthouse, he couldn't shake the feeling that it still wasn't over, and he was right. That night, Daniel was woken by the sound of his phone vibrating. It was Lily. "Dad," she whispered. "Mom's outside." Daniel shot out of bed, his heart pounding. "Stay where you are. Don't open the door." He grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and rushed downstairs. Through the peephole, he saw Jessica standing on the porch, her makeup smeared and her eyes wild. "Open the door, Daniel," she shouted, pounding against it. "Go home, Jessica," he called back. "No, you can't keep her from me." Daniel backed away and called the police within minutes. Flashing lights lit up the street, and officers were leading Jessica away in handcuffs. The next morning, Angela called with news. Jessica's been charged with trespassing and violating the restraining order. Daniel felt relief wash over him, but it was mixed with sadness. No matter how much anger he felt toward Jessica, part of him still grieved for what they'd lost. Lily hugged him tightly when he told her the news. "We're safe now, right?" "Yeah," Daniel said, holding her close. "We're safe." But as he looked out the window at the empty street, he couldn't help but wonder what came next. If you're still watching, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. What do you think? Did Jessica finally go too far? Or was there a way back for her? Let us know in the comments. Daniel sat in his car outside the police station, staring at the dimly lit entrance. Jessica was inside, booked and waiting for her first hearing after the trespassing incident. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt drained. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat, her arms wrapped around the stuffed bear she refused to leave behind, no matter how grown-up she claimed to be. Daniel adjusted the rearview mirror to check on her, the sight of her peaceful face grounding him. His phone buzzed Angela. "She's claiming it was a misunderstanding," Angela said, her voice sharp. "She's saying she was just there to drop off some things for Lily." Daniel rubbed his temples. "Of course she is." Angela sighed. "She's also pushing for a psychological evaluation, this time on herself." "What?" "She's going to play the victim," Angela explained. "She'll claim she's having a breakdown, that this was a moment of desperation, and that she deserves a second chance." Daniel's stomach churned. Jessica was spinning the narrative again, just like she always did. "Can she get away with it?" he asked. "Not if we're ready," Angela said. "But we need to push back hard. She's playing every card she has left." When Daniel got home, he barely had time to settle in before Lily came downstairs. "Is she going to jail?" He hesitated. "I don't know yet." Lily's eyes welled up. "I don't get it. Why won't she just stop?" Daniel knelt in front of her, brushing the hair out of her face. "Because sometimes people can't let go, even when they've already lost." Lily wiped her nose. "I don't want to see her anymore." Her words hit Daniel harder than he expected. For all of Jessica's flaws, she was still Lily's mother, and now Lily was pulling away. The days leading up to Jessica's hearing were chaos. She filed motion after motion, trying to delay the process and regain visitation rights. Meanwhile, Angela was working overtime to prepare their case, building a defense strong enough to counter every excuse Jessica could throw at them. But the tipping point came when Angela's investigator uncovered something explosive. Mark, Jessica's lover, had been subpoenaed to testify, and he wasn't happy about it. According to Angela's contacts, Mark had turned on Jessica the moment things started falling apart. He wasn't about to go down with her, and he had plenty to say. In a recorded deposition, Mark admitted to helping Jessica falsify documents, manipulate finances, and even plant evidence to frame Daniel as unstable. "She made me do it," Mark said, sounding nervous on the tape. "She said it was the only way to get custody of her kid." Daniel listened to the recording twice, his hands shaking. This was it, proof that Jessica had crossed every line. The day of the hearing arrived, and the courtroom was packed. Reporters had picked up the story after Jessica's arrest, turning it into a media circus. Jessica walked in looking fragile, her hair pulled back, wearing a modest dress and no makeup. She played the part perfectly, her eyes darting nervously as if she were the victim of some terrible misunderstanding. But Angela wasn't buying it, and neither was the judge. Mark's testimony hit like a wrecking ball. He laid it all out, the fake evidence, the financial schemes, and the late-night meetings where they planned their moves. Jessica tried to interrupt, but the judge silenced her with a sharp glare. By the time Angela presented the surveillance footage of Jessica and Mark together, the courtroom was dead silent. Jessica's lawyer asked for a recess, but the judge denied it. "I've seen enough," the judge said, looking directly at Jessica. "You have shown a blatant disregard for this court's authority, your child's well-being, and the truth effective immediately. I am terminating your parental rights pending further investigation. Any attempts to contact your daughter will result in criminal charges." Jessica broke down, sobbing into her hands. But Daniel didn't feel sorry for her. Lily sat beside him, clutching his hand. "It's over, right?" Daniel squeezed her fingers. "Yeah, it's over." But even as the gavel came down, Daniel knew there was no real victory here. Jessica had destroyed herself, and nearly taken them with her. That night, Daniel and Lily sat on the porch, watching the sunset. It felt like the first time they could breathe in months. "Do you think she'll get better?" Lily asked. Daniel exhaled. "I hope so, but we can't wait for her to change. We have to move forward." Lily nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I think we will." And for the first time, Daniel believed it. If you've been following this story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping recaps. What would you have done if you were in Daniel's shoes? Let us know your thoughts below. Daniel stood in his kitchen, staring at the court papers pinned to the fridge. Termination of parental rights. It was official. Jessica had lost everything: her custody, her reputation, and, from the looks of it, her sanity. But even with the legal battle behind him, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was still brewing. The finality of the court's decision should have brought closure, yet there was an unease lingering in the air. It started with the phone calls. Late at night, his phone would buzz, and when he answered, there'd be nothing but silence on the other end. The first time, he thought it was a wrong number. By the third, he was sure it wasn't. Angela brushed it off when he mentioned it. "She's grasping at straws, Daniel. She can't touch you anymore." But Daniel wasn't so sure. One night, as he was locking up the house, he noticed something: a car parked down the street with its lights off. It wasn't there when he got home, and it hadn't moved for hours. His pulse quickened. Was it Jessica? Or someone she sent? The next morning, he had security cameras installed around the house. Lily didn't question it. She had grown used to the precautions. But what neither of them expected was what the cameras would capture just 2 nights later. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Daniel's phone buzzed with a motion alert. Half asleep, he checked the feed and froze. Jessica was standing in the yard. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked thinner, almost gaunt. She wasn't knocking or calling out. She was just standing there. Daniel bolted out of bed, dialing 911 as he rushed downstairs. By the time the police arrived, Jessica was gone, but she left something behind, a small envelope tucked under the welcome mat. Angela came over first thing the next morning, pulling on gloves before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 4 words were scrawled across it in red ink. "You'll never be safe." Lily saw it before Daniel could stop her. "Dad." Her voice cracked. "It's okay," he said, pulling her into a hug, but it wasn't. Angela called the police again, But with Jessica already facing charges and under investigation, there wasn't much more they could do, other than issue yet another restraining order. She's unraveling, Angela said, but that makes her dangerous. Daniel tightened security even more, changing the locks, reinforcing the windows, and having patrol cars drive by the house regularly. But Jessica wasn't done. The next week, Lily's school called. "She's here," the principal whispered over the phone. "We're keeping Lily in the office, but Jessica's outside asking for her." Daniel's vision blurred as he grabbed his keys and raced to the school. By the time he got there, Jessica was gone, but Lily was shaken. "She said she missed me," Lily whispered as they drove home. "She said she just wanted to talk." Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. That night, he sat in the living room, staring at the security monitors. Sleep wasn't an option anymore. The next morning, Angela called with an update. "We're filing for a permanent restraining order," she said. "But Daniel, I think we need to go further. You need to be prepared for the worst." Daniel's stomach churned. He already knew what she meant. That evening, he sat Lily down and told her the truth. "We might need to leave," he said. Her eyes widened. "Leave like move?" "Just for a while," he said. "Somewhere safe." "But I don't want to leave my friends." Daniel's heart broke, but he couldn't let her safety come second. The next day, Angela finalized the paperwork, and Daniel started packing. But before they could leave, the unthinkable happened. Daniel returned home from a quick grocery run to find the front door wide open. Panic shot through him as he rushed inside, calling for Lily. No answer. He ran through the house, upstairs, downstairs, but she was gone. His hands trembled as he dialed 911. "My daughter's missing," he gasped. The police arrived within minutes, combing the house for evidence, but Daniel already knew who had taken her: Jessica. Angela arrived in the middle of the chaos, trying to keep Daniel calm. "They'll find her," she said. "We'll find her." But Daniel couldn't breathe. All he could think about was Lily, scared and alone. Hours passed. Then a call came in. Jessica's car had been spotted on a highway security camera, heading toward the cabin they used to rent when Lily was little. Daniel didn't wait. He jumped into his car and drove like his life depended on it. When he pulled up to the cabin, it was dark, but Jessica's car was parked outside. He stepped out, his heart pounding as he crept toward the door. Inside, he could hear Lily crying. "Mom, please, just let me go." "No!" Jessica snapped. "You don't understand. He's turning you against me." Daniel's blood boiled. He pounded on the door. "Jessica, open up." "No!" she screamed. "You can't take her." Daniel didn't wait. He kicked the door open, his eyes locking on Jessica, who was holding Lily's wrist. "Let her go, Jess," he said, his voice low and steady. Jessica's eyes were wild. I can't lose her." "You already did," Daniel said, stepping closer. Jessica broke. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed, sobbing. Lily bolted toward Daniel, throwing her arms around him. The police arrived moments later, pulling Jessica away as she screamed and cried. Daniel held Lily tight, whispering, "You're safe now. You're safe." But even as Jessica was dragged away, Daniel couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. This wasn't how he wanted it to end. If you're still watching, hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional and intense stories like this. What would you have done in Daniel's place? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Daniel sat in the hospital waiting room, his leg bouncing uncontrollably as he clutched a cup of cold coffee. Lily was inside one of the rooms with a counselor, a precaution the police insisted on after her abduction. She was physically unharmed, but the fear in her eyes earlier that night had shaken him to his core. Angela arrived minutes later, a stack of paperwork in her arms and an exhausted look on her face. "She's in custody," she said, dropping the papers onto the chair next to him. "They're holding her without bail." Daniel exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. "And Lily?" "She's going to need time," Angela admitted. "But she's strong. She'll get through this." Daniel leaned back against the chair, staring up at the sterile ceiling tiles. "How did we get here, Angela? How did it get this bad?" Angela gave him a look that was both sympathetic and firm. Jessica's been unraveling for months. You just didn't see it until it was too late. Daniel shook his head. I should have seen it sooner. You can't blame yourself, Angela said. This is on her, not you. But even as she spoke, Daniel couldn't shake the guilt. Moments later, Lily emerged from the counselor's office, her face pale but calm. She spotted Daniel and ran straight into his arms. I'm okay, she whispered. And for the first time, Daniel allowed himself to believe it. But the nightmare wasn't quite over yet. The following morning, Daniel received a call from Angela. Jessica's lawyer is pushing for a psychiatric evaluation, she said. Daniel's heart sank. You're kidding. He's arguing diminished capacity, Angela explained. If they prove she wasn't mentally stable, they could try to reduce the charges, or worse, reopen the custody case. Daniel felt the rage bubbling up again. No way she planned this, Angela. She knew exactly what she was doing. I know, Angela said, but we need to prove it. The next few days were a whirlwind of depositions, reports, and witness statements. Angela pulled in experts to analyze Jessica's behavior and build a case showing premeditation. Mark was subpoenaed again, and this time, he didn't hold back. She talked about it for weeks, Mark admitted on the stand. She said if the courts wouldn't give her Lily, she'd take her herself. Jessica's lawyer tried to spin it as desperation, but Angela countered with surveillance footage, text messages, and recordings of Jessica discussing her plans. And then came the final blow. Angela's investigator uncovered evidence that Jessica had been taking medication for anxiety and depression, but had stopped months earlier against her doctor's advice. Mrs. Hayes knowingly stopped treatment, Angela told the court. She made decisions that endangered not only her own stability, but her daughter's safety as well. This wasn't desperation. It was calculated. Jessica broke down in court, sobbing as the judge reviewed the evidence. When the verdict came, Daniel held his breath. Mrs. Hayes, the judge said, this court finds you guilty of parental kidnapping, violation of a restraining order, and endangerment of a minor. Given the evidence of premeditation, you will serve a minimum sentence of 5 years, with the possibility of parole after 3. Jessica collapsed in her chair as the bailiff approached. Daniel closed his eyes. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Daniel hugged Lily tightly as Angela stood beside them. You did it, Angela said. It's finally done. But Daniel wasn't celebrating, not yet. He knelt in front of Lily, brushing the hair from her face. No more running, he said. No more fear, we're safe now. Lily gave him a small smile, the first real smile he'd seen from her in weeks. Promise? Daniel nodded. Promise. But as they drove home, Daniel couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror, half expecting Jessica's car to appear behind them, because some scars don't heal overnight. If you've been following along this far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. What do you think? Did Jessica deserve her sentence, or was she a victim of her own mental health struggles? Let us know your thoughts below. The sun dipped below the horizon as Daniel sat on the back porch, watching Lily chase fireflies in the yard. Her laughter echoed through the air, a sound he hadn't heard in what felt like forever. For the first time in months, their home felt peaceful, safe. It had been 2 weeks since Jessica's sentencing, but the weight of it still lingered. Daniel kept expecting the phone to ring, or for a knock at the door to shatter their fragile sense of calm. But each day passed quietly, allowing them to finally start rebuilding their lives. Lily ran up to him, cupping her hands around a glowing firefly. Look, Dad, he smiled, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. It's beautiful. She grinned and let the firefly go, watching it disappear into the night. For a moment, Daniel saw the little girl she used to be, the one who hadn't known fear or betrayal. But he also saw the young woman she was becoming stronger, wiser. Do you think Mom will ever come back? Lily asked suddenly, her voice small. Daniel's heart clenched, but he didn't shy away from the question. I don't know, he admitted, but if she does, it'll be different. She has to prove she's changed first. Lily nodded, but her eyes stayed on the fireflies. I hope she gets better, she said softly. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. Me too. The next morning, Daniel met Angela at her office to finalize the last bit of paperwork. "You look better," she said, handing him the forms. "I feel better," Daniel admitted. Angela gave him a knowing smile. "And Lily?" "She's getting there." Angela leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You did everything right, Daniel. Don't ever doubt that." He exhaled, finally allowing himself to believe it. Later that day, Daniel picked Lily up from school and surprised her with ice cream, just the two of them. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it felt like the first normal thing they'd done in a long time. As they sat at the picnic table, Lily looked up at him. "Do you think things will ever go back to the way they were?" Daniel paused, thinking carefully about his answer. "No," he said finally. "And that's okay. Sometimes things change, and we just have to keep moving forward." Lily thought about it for a moment before nodding. "I like forward." And Daniel did too. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, their lives began to settle. Lily joined the volleyball team again, and Daniel went back to work, throwing himself into projects he'd put off for too long. But the biggest change came when he decided to reach out for help. Not just for Lily, but for himself. Therapy wasn't easy. Admitting the anger and guilt he'd carried through the entire ordeal felt like reopening wounds he'd tried to ignore, but it helped. And so did Lily. She was resilient, more than he ever gave her credit for. Seeing her thrive, despite everything, reminded Daniel why he'd fought so hard in the first place. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. Daniel recognized the handwriting immediately. Jessica. He debated throwing it away, but eventually opened it. The letter was short, just a few paragraphs apologizing for everything she'd done and promising to get help. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but she did ask for one thing: time. Daniel folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer. He wasn't ready to respond. Maybe one day he would be. But for now, his focus was on Lily and on healing. Months passed, and with each one, the shadows of their past faded a little more. By spring, Daniel had renovated Lily's bedroom, turning it into a space that felt entirely her own, bright, colorful, and safe. They planted a garden together, built a treehouse, and even adopted a rescue dog named Max. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. One evening, as they sat by the fire pit roasting marshmallows, Lily looked over at him. "Do you think we're happy now?" Daniel smiled. "Yeah, I think we are." And for the first time in what felt like forever, he truly believed it. This story reminds us just how fragile trust can be, and how hard it is to rebuild when it's broken. Daniel's journey wasn't easy, but it proves that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way forward. What about you? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to fight for what mattered most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more emotional recaps and gripping stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.